Look at it this way. Think of how stupid the average person is, and then realize half of them are stupider than that.
Hiya. I want to talk to you about the temperature checks they're doing with the temperature guns.
What? Temperature guns? Guns that shoot temperature? Or do you mean thermometers? Those little radiative thermometers? Is that what you're talking about?
And I want to read you a post which was on Solutions Empowerment, but I do not know where it was reposted from. And there's a couple of things to think about. The very act of pointing a gun at someone's head.
Yeah. I know it's a slight technical difference. It's not a gun. It's a thermometer. You know, guns shoot bullets that kill people. Pointing guns at people's heads would be dangerous. Pointing a thermometer at someone's head to get a radiative measure of their temperature is harmless.
And normalizing that, particularly towards, well, anyone said, but particularly the children, it has to have an effect on you at an energetic level.
And I'm sure you're just about to cite the study that shows that. What? You're not? It's almost like there is no effect from taking someone's temperature with a radiative thermometer.
And it's terribly wrong, but there's also other things to think about too, particularly with regard to your pineal gland.
Oh no, not the pineal gland!
Which is vitally important and something which is under constant attack and has been for a long time, because it's the bridge, if you will, or the gateway is probably a better one, to the higher energy realms, the spirit worlds.
Aha. So the pineal gland is constantly under attack by some unnamed assailant for some unknown reason, because it's a bridge to higher energy realms? This is just got to be some quack. I mean, there's no way anyone could watch this and take it. What? It's got over 2 million hits and a 90-something% approval rating.
Think of how stupid the average person is, and then realize half of them are stupider than that.
Well, I know. Maybe he is some sort of medical expert or something.
Anyway, let me read you this. And this is from an Australian nurse.
Yeah, I'm going to have to push extra doubt on the Australian nurse thing. And you'll see why in a second.
I'm really worried. I've started implementing the new protocols in force. One of my new tasks is taking and recording each person's temperature.
Yep, that's one of the easiest and cheapest things that you can measure to work out if someone's got a fever, which would be an indication if they're, say, sick or not.
I aim for the center of their forehead with my thermometer-shaped gun. I pull the trigger, wait for the beep, and record the temperature.
Oh man, I would love to see how melodramatic these people are when they go shopping. You know, I aim the gun at the product and then I pull the trigger until I hear a beep.
It also keeps the kids amused.
I always apologize to the person before proceeding. After doing this a dozen or more times, I suddenly had a realization. Are we being desensitized to be targeted at the head and also causing potential health issues by aiming an infrared ray to the pineal gland?
Damn, that's a lot wrong with a single sentence. Are we being desensitized to targeting the head? What must she think when she uses a hairdryer? I mean, are women systematically being taught to point gun-shaped objects at their heads?
And also causing potential health issues by aiming an infrared ray to the pineal gland.
So much wrong. Look, firstly, infrared thermometers do not give off thermal radiation like that. They're passive devices. The nearest analogy I can give you is they're kind of like solar cells. And the way they work is the more sunlight that falls on solar cells, the more voltage they generate. And this is more or less the same thing, but with infrared radiation. The more infrared light that shines on it, the higher the voltage it gives, and it returns a higher temperature.
Awesome. So, here you can see just how hot my hands are on the grand scheme of things. And if we look right down the hole of the infrared thermometer, you'll see that it doesn't generate any heat. And of course, when I push the button, you will see that, certainly compared to me as an infrared radiator, it is an absolute non-starter in terms of being a heater.
But even if they were infrared emitters of one sort or another. Infrared light has almost zero penetration of the flesh.
So here I have two identical looking bowls of water. If only there was some way I could tell the temperature of them without doing anything invasive. To which the answer is yes, I can just use one of these little infrared thermometers and a little push, and you see that that one says 37 degrees and this one says 20 degrees. Now the way these things work is they work on a principle that all objects irradiate infrared light proportional to their temperature. So the hotter the object is, the more infrared light it puts off. And in there, if it'll actually focus for me, you can't actually see it, there is actually a sort of little detector, and all that basically does is it measures the amount of infrared light coming off an object and converts that into a temperature. And the infrared's not perfect like this, and to demonstrate that, I've got this boy here, who is a infrared camera, and you will very quickly get the feeling that these things aren't that cheap. There's a reflection of me. Hello, me. Anyway, so that's a germanium lens on the front there, and these things actually see in the infrared. So if I scroll over to the infrared view of these two bowls here, you will see that there's a huge difference in the temperature of the two. Now there are some exceptions with the infrared. This rule that the temperature of an object is basically determined, or the amount of infrared radiation coming off an object determines its temperature. Metals, for instance, this is actually a very cold piece of metal, which you'll see it's almost a perfect mirror. So in the infrared, you're actually looking at how warm the thermal camera is there. You tend to see, the temperature of whatever is reflected in these objects. So, if you were to try and take the temperature there, you would see it's hot, and if you would try and do it there, you would see it's cold. And let's try and do that with the IR thermometer. And that one comes out at 33, and this one comes out at 19. So infrared is very bad for metal objects. There's one other thing that the infrared fails on, and that's objects that are transparent to the infrared. Now, with water, you'll see with my hand here, when it goes into the hot water, my fingers vanish almost immediately. You can't see through water in the infrared. And if I do that again with the cold water, you'll see that my fingers again, you can't see through water at all in the infrared. But that's not true with all objects. So, for instance, polythene, thin film of polythene. If I put that over the thermal camera, it makes basically no difference. It's completely transparent. So you can't actually get a good sense of the temperature of an object if it's transparent to the infrared. So, if I were to take the temperature of my plastic, it basically returns the temperature of the water. And again, if I do the same thing here, it returns the temperature of the water. Now, that's not true with everything. Most things are very non-transparent to the infrared. Say, for instance, like this piece of kitchen towel. Now, if I actually put my hand behind there, you'll see that my fingerprints come through really quite quickly. But if I wanted to try and take the thermometer reading, I just get the temperature of the towel on this one and the temperature of the towel on this one.
And if people were partially transparent to the infrared, you wouldn't see me. You would see me as partially transparent in the infrared. And you don't. But then, even if I were partially transparent to the infrared, for this to work, the pineal gland would have to not be transparent to the infrared. It would have to absorb it somehow. And what would happen if you were to irradiate your pineal gland to infrared light? Well, the same thing that happens if you irradiate the rest of your body to infrared light. It will get slightly warmer. But hey, let's just give them everything they assert here as correct. The infrared thermometers do actually beam out infrared light, and somehow that penetrates the skin and irradiates the pineal gland. Well, the world is full of infrared light sources, like, say, for instance, sunlight or infrared heaters.
Meanwhile, things that our Australian nurse wasn't worried about, things like hair dryers. This one which I use mostly to demist my telescopes. Let's see what they look like in the infrared, shall we? So so that's just from having it on for a fraction of a second. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the heating elements off and blow cold air through it for a bit. Yeah, that's all the way off. That's just cooling down the element by blowing cold air over it. This is not really putting out much in the way. It's not putting out much in the way of heat at all, right? And just to demonstrate that, that's what it's like normally, and this is what it's like if I turn the heating on full, like that. There we go. That's the heating on full, right? Oh, flamethrower.
Thunder, thunder,
flamethrower. Right? And again, if I turn the heating all the way off, so this is now just the hairdryer cooling down, compared to the infrared thermometer on full. Alternatively, right, if that's not good enough for you, there are other things that give off infrared light, like, well, the sun's the most obvious one. The sun is a massive infrared heater compared to this, but this is just going to be a infrared light bulb, which I'm just going to turn on for a bit, and we will see what happens, and it heats things up pretty quick, right? So you see that the glass here is fairly transparent to the infrared. That'll heat up fairly quickly as well. So if you've got something with a nice low heat capacity and you stick that in there, you'll see that it gets nuked very quickly into being nice, warm paper. Meanwhile, let's just try that again with the deadly laser emitting light source, shall we? And it's like, I'm not quite seeing this myself. Not quite seeing this, you know? Idiots.
Is our Australian nurse here really suggesting that all the time the babies are out being subjected to infrared light, their pineal glands are actually under attack?
So I started taking the temperature on the wrist, which turned out to be more accurate given that the forehead is cooler than the wrist and the results differ by more than 1 degree in some cases.
Again, I'm going to have to push extra out on that. First of all, people use the head because it's got a fairly constant sort of circulation. If you've got bad circulation, it tends to be your hands and feet that cool down the most.
So this is what you want to be doing with your temperature screening, is you're looking for people who are hotter than normal, because that's an indicator that people might be sick and that they're running a temperature. So you just basically want a simple way of screening people, and the head is by far the most constant sort of temperature thing that you're going to get, because it's basically exposed for everyone. Whereas the hands and wrists, these are, a lot of this will depend on how good your circulation is, and, if you've been handling water and your fingers are a little colder than normal and all that sort of thing. And so it turns out, armpits are probably not that bad, and if you get people to lift up their clothes, that'll be fairly decent as well. But, let's be honest, just a simple temperature reading on the forehead, that's fine.
So I started taking the temperature on the wrist, which turned out to be more accurate given that the forehead is cooler than the wrist and the results differ by more than 1 degree in some cases.
Reliable compared to what?
Oral thermometer, my eye! Think warm thoughts, boy, 'cause this is mighty cold.
Yeah, I mean, what did she benchmark these inaccurate measurements against?
I went to a shopping mall and people were lining up to get their temperatures taken by an employee who was obviously not a medic and was not properly educated on how to correctly perform this procedure.
What? You mean you point the infrared sensor at the thing you want to take the temperature of? They hadn't been given this deeply complicated and convoluted training.
Many were shocked when it was my turn and I took the gun that was being directed at my forehead and redirected it to my wrist. I spoke softly but firmly and told the employee that an infrared thermometer must never be pointed at someone's forehead, especially babies and young children.
Oh, wasn't that nice to so gently but firmly assert your complete and total ignorance about the infrared?
Oh, flamethrower!
In addition, it requires basic knowledge of how to properly read someone's temperature, i.e. placing a thermometer on the wrist or elbow fold is much more accurate and much less harmful.
Man, that is some grade A bullshit right there.
It was very disturbing to me to observe children getting used to seeing an object the shape of a gun aiming at the forehead and without any negative reaction from the adults as if this was normal and acceptable. As a medical professional, I refused to directly target the pineal gland, which is located directly in the center of the forehead with an infrared ray. Our pineal glands must be protected as it is crucial for our health both now and in the future.
And then we go through a sort of wiki-type description of the pineal gland, which is clearly just thrown in there to show that she really is a nurse who really knows what she's talking about.
Conversion of nervous system signals to endocrine signals causes sleepiness, influences sexual development, influences immune system function, antioxidant activity. Ask yourself, is it ever wise to aim an infrared laser light at the pineal gland?
So, these idiots seem to be under the delusion that the laser spot here is actually in some way related to the functioning of the infrared thermometer. It's not. The red spot is purely for targeting. I would say a gimmick, but it's not. It's very useful. Diode lasers are dirt cheap, and it basically says these things record the temperature of the object in a cone in front of it, and that's just to help you see where that cone is actually centered. A point that I can actually demonstrate very nicely by just moving my finger over the laser spot, and you'll see it has no effect whatsoever on the temperature or functioning. However, if I put a second finger in front of the actual thermal sensor, you'll see it has a very big effect on the temperature. So they seem to be confusing the fact that it's got a laser on it with... They think that's actually how this records the temperature. It doesn't. It's just... Oh, we're going to do the Star Trek thing here. Oh, Locutus. No, okay. Right, so we can close that off and it has no effect on the temperature, but I move my finger over there and it'll just take the temperature of my finger instead.
Naturally, there is a very simple reason why people go for handheld infrared thermometers like this and not infrared cameras. Because an infrared thermometer like this costs some $20 and a camera like this costs some $20,000.
I'm going to leave you to have a think about that one. If you are subjected to those kind of temperature checks, you might want to redirect that to your elbow fold or your wrist to give them a more accurate reading and to avoid any potential health damage that they are inadvertently being trained to cause in you.
And this is just what is so mind-blowing here. That this man, who considers himself sage and wise and not subject to misinformation. I mean, these are literally the memes that he has at the end of his video. He then reads one unsubstantiated post on the internet and is completely brainwashed by it into thinking that infrared thermometers actually emit radiation. They don't. That significantly penetrates the human skin. It doesn't. That it can be used to target internal organs in your brain. Also not true. And that all these people taking these temperature readings are actually being trained to inadvertently harm you. Why? And by who? You know, I mean, it's basically just complete paranoia here. He's taken something as banal as using a hairdryer and turned it into some vast government conspiracy to target your pineal gland.
Hello again, folks. Now, my subs have asked me for a while now, why don't you do a video on COVID-19?
Yes, apparently people are queuing up to get their advice on COVID-19 from this guy.
There's been tons of videos on YouTube elsewhere about COVID-19, and you've got to be careful. Because if you say the wrong thing, it could be misconstrued as conspiracy theory. Next thing you know, your video's gone, your channel's gone.
Well, that does kind of depend now, doesn't it? I mean, if you're actually debunking a conspiracy theory, they take your videos down. Yeah, I empathize with you. However, if you are, just say, for instance, pushing a coronavirus conspiracy, then we're in a little more of a grey area. You know, putting out advice that's probably going to get people killed.
Get prosecuted. Look happened to those guys from Doncaster in the Isle of Man. 14 days prison. And a Tesco worker as well, apparently.
Yeah. They broke quarantine and they got punished for it. What was the problem with that again?
Now, I've always put a mask on when I'm going outside, to shops, whatever, the pub.
Aha. So why is my spidey sense tingling that you're about to make some completely stupid argument as to why you think masks are useless?
I'm being discreet, but that's just me. I don't want to cause a fuss.
I see. So you wear a mask to not cause a fuss rather than to stop the spread of an infectious disease. Right.
Nothing like that. I know there are people out there fucking scared to death of COVID-19 because of what the government and whatever have told them about it.
Well, yeah, it has killed over 1 million people so far, and no one really wants to become a statistic in a pandemic.
There I was today cooking a casserole.
Yes, his build-up to why masks are completely ineffective starts with cooking a casserole.
And I wanted to chop an onion, and I hate chopping onions because I cry my heart out, all right? Not in a boo-hoo-hoo kind of way, I'm just waterworks.
I've got to give you a fair warning at this point. This is probably one of the most dumbest arguments that you will ever hear.
I hate it. I've been known to sellotape newspapers to my face to stop me from crying, because once I cry, I mean, that onion, my God, it stings as well. So I thought, I know, I'll wear one of these. And so I did. And it didn't work.
Okay, let me just see if I've got this straight. You find that onions get into your eyes and make your eyes water. You put on a face mask that covers your mouth and nose, not your eyes. And your proof that the face mask doesn't work is that it didn't stop things getting in your eyes.
And it didn't work. And I thought, hang on, water droplets, right? Onion droplets get in through the nose. They then stimulate the tear gland and make you cry. And I thought, bloody hell.
Yeah, and I thought, bloody hell, is that really how he thinks that it works? That all you would have to do to stop crying when you're chopping onions is hold your nose. In reality, wearing goggles is actually quite effective, because it stops the gas released by chopping the onions from getting to your eyes. But even if he was right that inhaling this gas is what was making your eyes water by some mechanism, he's still talking crap. Because the gas that makes your eyes water is a gas just like oxygen or nitrogen. It'll quite happily go through a mask designed to filter out particulates. I mean, his argument is so dumb, it might as well have been, but the mask lets through oxygen. So how can it hope to stop virus particles?
Cry, and I thought, bloody hell, if a mask can't keep out onion droplets, I mean, look at the gaps here. There's gaps everywhere, right? It's completely useless against COVID-19 because science tells us.
Honestly, I think we can just about get by without you using the phrase, because science tells us.
The mainstream media, the government tells us that COVID-19, you can put 10,000 of them. the little COVID balls or atoms, wherever they are, across a pinhead. Now look, that's not a pinhead. You can get in anywhere. So these are useless. These are just pointless. So why are we wearing masks? What's the real reason?
Well, one of the things that we know about virus spread is the virus has to get from one person's lungs to another person's lungs. That means it's got to leave the body of someone who is infected. And that usually happens through the mouth and nose. So, if you actually cover the mouth and nose, and that stops some 90-odd% of the virus particles coming out of their body, you reduce the rate of the virus spread. That's the real reason why people wear masks.
Now look, that's not a pinhead. You can get in anywhere. So these are useless. These are just pointless. So why are we wearing masks?
And that, in a nutshell, is why the cases of the coronavirus in the UK are currently going boom. And across Europe, they're going boom. And in America. Well, America ain't quite there yet, but I'll bet you it is in a couple of weeks. In fact, let me make a prediction for you. I'm going to make a prediction that in 2 weeks' time, America will smash its peak infection rate. And I'm going to be conservative and say 100,000 cases. I mean, we've only had about 1% of the population infected with the coronavirus. What happens if it gets 10 or 100 times worse? Now, there'll be a bunch of these conspiracy theorists out there who just blow this off. It's like, yeah, Project Fear. We've heard it all before. Well, no, not really. That's exactly what's happened outside my window over the last month. I currently live in Czechia, which was, for a long time, one of the least infected countries in the world. And in the period of about a month, it's gone from being one of the least infected countries in the world to one of the most infected countries in the world. It's gone from a few thousand cases per day to some 15,000 cases per day. And 10 people a day dying to 100. And if I scale Czechia up to the size of America, that would be equal to 500,000 new cases per day and 3,000 a day dying. And that turnaround took about a month. And this is not a worst case scenario. This is just the preamble to the worst case scenario. This is just getting warmed up. I mean, you tell me, do you see any signs of slowdown in these numbers? That's not some speculative crap. That's exactly what's happening outside my window right now. And that's why I made this video, because sure, these videos on debunking coronavirus conspiracies and the such like have been a thorn in my side for the last 6 or so months, with videos repeatedly getting demonetized and taken down. But this isn't going to go away, and it's going to kill a lot more than 1 million people. So in the meantime, you'd like to help me out and support this channel when things do get demonetized, that's greatly appreciated, and you can support this channel directly through Patreon. So stay safe and thanks for watching.